perpetual maintenance. That's what bureaucracy's like. They like that. It's like an insurance agent. They want renewals. They want that flow.
Uh-huh.
They get that money from the government.
Well,
they have to
it's
spend it to
perpetual
get more.
maintenance.
They
We
have to
have
spend it
more
to get
people.
more.
We're going to have to hire more people to patch and repair these roads.
Yep.
So it's building, as my dad put it in the 50s, they're empire builders.
Yeah.
Bureaucrats, basically. They take a small department and manifest it to a bigger department.
Have a seat.
And that's what the Department of Transportation people do. But worse off is when they
Have you asked
patch
Chris?
concrete with
Have you
asphalt.
seen the
Yeah.
flag?
Not yet.
470 is full of that, and I'm going down the road like this, dodging those patches.
Well, it's what I refer to as destructive maintenance.
Yeah.
It's maintenance, but it's destructive because it causes more damage. You notice how a pothole goes small to large?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've noticed that.
What I'm talking about.
Then they become a strip.
You don't have any checks you haven't cashed, have you? Do you?
oil coming
I don't think so.
I
Take
don't
care,
think
have
so
a
either.
pleasant week.
Have a good trip.
Thank you.
Enjoy your trip.
I will, thank you.
It's easy to watch NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube TV.
You've got the new eyes. Bud and Jackie, they've
Yeah, they're
been,
out there gabbing.
yeah. That's the one issue about, that's one issue about the Sunday, you know? It's hard to round them up sometimes. Hi, Midnight. Hey, buddy. Look at those beautiful eyes. God.
Jamie, my apartment was robbed last night. If only Progressive had renter's insurance like their home insurance.
That way we can bundle our cars and get the same 24/7 protection.
Totally.
Hi, mister. Yeah. Since Sylvie stays in here now at night, he doesn't so much come in here. She's
Well, they don't get along.
no, they don't. She's kind of feisty. She's feisty with all of them. She's cute as can be, but she doesn't like her siblings. She doesn't like Midnight.
For all Americans and focus on investing right now in you, the American people. And you can trust the way forward.
Oh, Cat.
Jackie said you brought your book, right?
Yeah,
Books.
yeah, she's coming over.
Yeah.
She can quit talking long enough.
He wants to sit in on the class too.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to learn about this Christian stuff. Oh, hi.
Now, somebody asked me about living down south.
No.
Baptist church, Baptist church,
Baptist.
Baptist church. The only time it isn't a Baptist church, it's a Catholic church.
Yeah.
Catholics are getting way too much
Well,
influence.
you've seen the what's the name of it?
I don't know. Not in here.
Okay.
I can't think, but they're downtown here. They bought a big building downtown.
They're also very openly political. I was sitting there playing a machine in the casino,
Uh-huh.
and this guy, and he was about half wasted, but had on a military hat. I was stationed right in Gulfport, which was like 10 miles from where we were. He said, "Are you going to vote right?" Well, that's none of his business.
Exactly.
And I told him so. I said, I'm going to vote by secret ballot, just like I always do.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Oh, the joker that asked me if I was going to vote right.
Oh,
Yes. Been doing it for 70 years.
Yeah. Yeah, they can
all
know
he did
how.
was walk by and he's got hair all over my papers.
Really?
Well,
I
I
had to
just
wait till,
brushed it off.
well, you did too. I had to wait till 21. Now they can vote at 18.
Yeah. I was lucky that women even
Your
got the right
books
to
are where?
vote by the time I got here.
You were asking him.
You remember
We
that
were
one?
tempted to stay
Yeah.
down there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
19,
was something like
21 or 22.
50 Baptist churches. No other, except there was one Greek Orthodox and several Catholic churches.
You don't have
And on
one?
every billboard.
No, I left everything home because I didn't know
Okay.
we were going to do this today. That's all
on,
right.
on every billboard, there was something about Jesus saves.
Yeah.
Green stamps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least he used to.
Uh-huh. Just
And great big crosses. You know,
huge.
I mean,
There
metals.
were
They were
crosses that were
50 foot in
3
the air.
stories.
And one of them had a concertina wire around it, you know, the top of it, for like the, I guess it was
Crown of
the
thorns,
crown
yeah.
of thorns.
Oh, lovely.
Oh, it
So,
was just
yeah.
really peachy.
Yeah.
But it, I mean, you could see them for 3 miles. They were that big. About that big
Lucky
around.
you.
So you go to the
So-
Baptist church and you vote Republican.
That's right. That's all there is to it.
And if you don't tell anybody.
Yeah,
I couldn't be a Baptist.
I couldn't either.
I was. And,
Oh, I know.
well, I mean, actually, I wasn't. I went to the church, but I just couldn't quite buy into it. So, consequently, it didn't do me any good.
I
My dearest school
was
friend.
born into First Christian Disciples of Christ,
Yeah.
and it was kind of a liberal First Christian.
The ones I've been familiar with, the Disciples of Christ, they're pretty liberal. I
Pretty
mean,
open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think of them as fundamentalists.
No, they aren't. They aren't.
Well, Church of Christ is.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
saw a lot of those too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started several times with one of Charles Fillmore's prayers. Jesus Christ is now here, infusing me and the world with his light and wisdom. Jesus Christ is now here, infusing me and the world with his light and wisdom. Can we speak it together? Together? Jesus Christ is now here, infusing me and the world with his light and wisdom. And we give thanks for that light and for that wisdom. Know that it indeed is within each one of us. For that same light of Christ that shines in Jesus shines in us. Amen. This, the beginning of section 8. We didn't do any of it, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah. The evidence suggests that the New Testament is not a history of actual events, but a history of the evolution of Christian mythology. That's Timothy Frecka and Peter Gandy, Jesus Mysteries. From a hoary civilization, Egypt, comes the literature that ends all debate by offering the incontrovertible evidence that the Gospels are not and never were histories. They're now proven to have been cryptic dramas of the spiritual evolution of humanity and of the history of the human soul in its earthly tabernacle of flesh. That's Alvin Boyd Kuhn from his book, Who is the King of Glory?
What does the word hoary mean?
There was a time I knew, and now
There was a time I knew.
yeah, things
Okay.
go.
Basic,
The hoary head of God. Is that not a phrase?
I don't know, I haven't heard
The
that.
hoary head of something. I don't know.
Hoary definition.
I would, thought it was very material, very earthy, muddy kind of. Maybe not. Does that work?
Similar words are trite, hackneyed. The hoary American notion that bigger is better.
Uh,
Yeah. It's not a compliment.
so it's not a compliment of the Egyptians here, then.
Very old and familiar and therefore not interesting or funny.
Huh.
Okay, we know the very old, and we don't know about interesting because we didn't know about it.
Well, it's a very old civilization, that's
Yeah.
for sure. From a hoary civilization, Egypt, comes the literature that ends all debate by offering the incontrovertible evidence that the Gospels are not and never were histories. Yep.
It also means white-haired.
Okay. I'm sure that some of those Egyptians were white-haired.
Yeah, maybe you're an ancient Egyptian, huh?
But let's continue down with the bottom section where the big B is. By now it's more than obvious that no part of this investigation is intended to take away from the enormous importance of the Gospels to my own spiritual journey or to any renewal of Christianity in our day. It is my deep conviction and experience that the metaphorical allegorical interpretation given to them by the work of Massey, Kuhn in particular, greatly enhances their relevance to our lives, their power to enlarge and uplift one's spiritual vision. At present, given the prevalence of an overly literalist approach, I have come to realize that they are largely, indeed one could say completely, misunderstood. To read them as history is to be forced to leave all sense of normal reality outside on the church steps. Taken literally, they present a world of abnormal events totally unrelated to people's authentic living today. When in the liturgy the Sunday Gospel is read, the reader says, "The word of the Lord," and the people respond with, "Thanks be to God." But they usually have little sense of what it means. Yeah,
Can we mute the television?
yeah. Excuse me, Susie.
Just thinking about you.
Are you okay if I just shut it off?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's better.
Yeah. Well, he does make it clear that, at least for him, he sees that it's an improvement on Christianity from what he's known in the past after being an Anglican priest, teaching in a seminary, because all of this stuff, with the changes that were made in the 3rd and 4th century, it wasn't real.
Yeah. He's saying don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is bathwater that we're throwing out.
Oh, yeah. Did you ever wonder, is this right? Is this religion, is it real? Do you ever wonder if there was some place somebody knew the real truth?
No, by the time I started looking at the Bible, I was already in unity in interpretation.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get stuck in that literalism like a lot of people do. And that was later they began to realize how stuck the churches are in that.
And that's a big thing, the freedom that comes with the metaphysical interpretation of the Bible, because that's where you're not seeing the Bible as a real story of something that happened, but it's to show you how you grow and evolve as a spiritual being, and that makes a lot of difference. The stories when you're just reading about what happened to somebody else when they never happened at all is kind of pitiful.
Or they happened in another culture 2,000 or 3,000 years ago that was not even our culture.
Yeah.
I've been reading some of the Jewish stuff. I have a library in my house of Jewish books and so forth, law and all that sort of thing. And the woman who was taken in adultery and was about to be stoned to death by these men. And Jesus said, "You have not sinned, so cast the first stone." Well, he wrote something in the dirt. And I got back to where I found that law, that if a woman was taken in adultery in the country where she was surrounded by and supported by her people, that she would be stoned to death if she did that. But if she were taken in adultery in the city where she did not have that kind of support, the men were to be stoned to death along with her. And that's why those guys hurried away.
Excuse me, I have to go do laundry.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
The first thing I thought was, it takes two.
Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
The stronger power over the weaker.
how does this, that we're studying, how does this compare with what the Jews think?
The Jews do not, they're not involved in the Gospels at all. They stop with Malachi, and they're still, their teaching is that the Messiah is coming,
Yeah, I know that.
and that's close enough. It doesn't kind of step over to the line that the Messiah is here and that in each one of us. But some of the Jewish writers do write that way. I bought a book that said there's no Messiah and you're it. And these modern Jewish writers are getting this. How could I not buy that book?
When I was with the Kabbalists, they often spoke about this spark of divinity that's in every one of us. Now, that's that implantation of the Christ in us. They don't call it that,
No.
Right.
but a spark of divinity or a spark of God. But that's the same thing.
Yeah.
So they see that there is divinity in man. That is, and everybody has it. It's few that have realized it.
And they said, we are the hands of God, the eyes of God. This is how they teach it, and it's the same thing, that God is in you, or you. And without humanity, God isn't here. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, there's all the atomic level of life, but there's no consciousness here that can expand and grow. Just think about that. If there's no people here, God is not here as consciousness.
I don't know whether I told you this or not, but I was talking to a friend and we were talking about the presence of the Christ within you, or God within you. When you see someone die, they, right at the end, they kind of relax and go ahead and pass away. Our theory was that you couldn't hear this consciousness because you're too busy. Your mind is, you know, in your life. And then when you're dying, all of a sudden, you realize it. You hear it. You're aware of it. And that's why they die peacefully. But it's the first time that you're aware
There's
of
some that it
it
is,
because you can't hear it. I mean, you don't stop and listen long enough.
Yeah.
In meditation, maybe perhaps you said you felt it.
That's where you get connection to it. If the the crazy daytime mind is going all the time,
Yeah.
you can't hear anything for it. You just constantly are hearing your strange thoughts. It doesn't allow it. That's why the silence is the silence, because you need to silence your inner talk, your thoughts and all of that, so that you can come to it. It's still small voice. It doesn't scream at you.
I think what we call premonitions too.
Yes.
Twice. I was driving the car. Once I pulled into a ditch just before a car came over the hill and would have had us head
Yes,
Yeah.
on. And
I remember that, man. That was,
once it was nighttime. I was driving probably about 80 miles an hour, and I came up and I let off the gas. And when we came over the hill, 3 big deer were standing right in the road. And, you know, we were going slow enough now that I could brake because they wouldn't move and I couldn't drive around them. There wasn't enough room.
Yeah, that would have been sad.
But I did stop.
Deer are essentially blind, so they would not have seen
Yeah,
your
no,
headlights.
no.
Yeah. They navigate with those ears. You see them turning all the time.
Yeah. Such beautiful creatures. We'd never want to hurt them. Somebody want to take the second paragraph on that page 138? As the scholars.
as the scholars of the controversial California-based Jesus Seminar have pointed out, some 20 Gospels of various kinds have come down to us either in whole or in pieces from the first 3 centuries of the Common Era, but only 4 ended up included in the New Testament. The seminar, founded in 1985 by Robert Funk, now consists of a group of over 75 internationally recognized biblical scholars who are experts in a wide variety of fields, from ancient history to archaeology. Sifting through the Gospels of the book of Acts, grading the various sayings and deeds of Jesus according to their probability of authenticity, they have produced a very different man from the figure that is icon of Orthodox Christianity. In their findings, Jesus had a human father whose name may not have been Joseph. He was born not in Bethlehem, but in Nazareth. He was an itinerant sage who liked the company of social outcasts. He healed many psychosomatic illnesses. He did not walk on water, feed the crowd with miraculous meals, change the water into wine, or raise the dead.
Darn.
Yeah.
In their view, there was no empty tomb. Belief in the resurrection is based on the visionary experiences of Peter, Mary, and later Paul.
Peter, Paul, and Mary.
That's right.
Jesus did not, in their view, preach that he would come again. The chief flaw in the entire Jesus Seminar approach, however, is that like the fundamentalists, the scholars of the Jesus Seminar seem stuck with the mistaken view that they are ultimately dealing with
History, yes.
If they could only strip away all
Accretions.
accretions and get back to the kernel of, or core. But myth treated as history invariably falls apart. Instead of a powerful spiritual message, they've ended up with scraps of stones for bread.
Yeah, it's amazing. These are scholars. These are men who are supposed to know an awful lot about the Bible and Jesus and all. But the one thing they don't know is that they're reading it all wrong.
I had to tell Robert Funk that.
Did you?
Yeah,
Good.
I invited them. I was regional rep, and I was in
Uh-huh.
charge of educating the people who came to the regional conference. And I invited him, and they came, and he was trying to set us up like the Jesus seminar, you know, with the boxes with the 3 colored marbles and so
Uh-huh.
forth. And he couldn't understand why we didn't argue about these things like the scholars did.
Yeah.
And he got quite frustrated, and we called for a break, and I took him aside and sat down with him, and I said, this is who we are, and this is how we see this, and this is why you're not getting arguments. There's nothing to argue about. The spiritual truth is the truth, but what you want to argue about are historical things. And he said, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's another one of my spiritual surprises.
It was a whole different process than he
Yeah.
was accustomed to.
Yeah, so after that, the second half, we started to talk to him about how we saw the Bible.
Yeah.
That was another one of my spiritual surprises. I got
was
to tell
good.
Robert Funk what it was about.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's got 75 scholars, and I'm telling him what it's about.
As soon as he came out, as they came out with the book,
Yeah.
the 5 Gospels,
Yeah.
I have it over there. I bought it as soon as it was released, and I hoped that it would have some information in
It
it.
doesn't.
It doesn't.
I have it too.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's got color coding, whether they think Jesus said it or not, but really,
Who knows?
he didn't. He didn't.
He didn't say any of it.
He didn't say any of it.
I mean, this stuff was written 80 to 120 years after his death and so-called resurrection. Do you remember what you had for lunch last week, for heaven's sake?
Yeah.
And they're writing this stuff that after 80 years, and what they're writing are the most popular teachings that the teachers carried on, and who knows what focus they had on those teachings. They wrote whatever, and that's why the 4 Gospels are a little different.
Yeah.
Like playing the game gossip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Send a word around the table, and by the time it gets to the last one, it's not close.
And in that circle of the scholars, they don't dare step out of line. You may remember I read a portion of Tom Harpur's writing that talked about when he first presented these ideas. And he was not the inventor of these ideas. When he discovered them and then started to write about them, he was getting hate mail.
Yeah.
Death threats. Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been kind of ugly, because anybody who was a scholar would, and Funk doesn't know this stuff. They don't teach it because they don't believe it. They're so caught up in the way the church has presented it since the 3rd and 4th century that there's no room for something. If you would write a paper for your doctorate that went into all of this, there are plenty of schools that would.
They wouldn't let me in. They would let me sweep the floors.
Yep,
No,
exactly.
No,
Yeah.
no. Yeah, I looked up some of those doctoral programs in other universities, and a lot of them are socially focused. I looked at that Union Seminary that a lot of them go to. and you've got to be focused on social justice
Mhm.
in that one. So all of those seminaries, even though they're theological, Union Theological Seminary, even though it says theology, it's not about God.
Yeah. Several years ago, somebody I have a great deal of respect for said, if your church starts talking about social justice, run like hell.
Yeah,
Because it's not about spirituality.
it's not even about justice.
No,
You know,
no.
I know.
Yeah.
Probably Hollows is the only university that would allow me to write the dissertation that I'm writing.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is, I was researching the super collider in Zurich, Switzerland, where they smashed the first atom. And when they did that, what it did was just spew forth so many particles that they didn't even know were there. And of course, you can't see these things. So they have an electronic picture of what that looks like. But one of them was called the Higgs boson, and it was called the God particle.
Mhm.
And that God particle really didn't have any matter to it, but it carried the forces between the other particles. And then he said it lives in the Higgs field. And the Higgs field is God, it's cosmic. It said the Higgs field is in everything. And we talk about God being in everything. I mean, they finally hit on God, so I can get to the point in that dissertation where I can say, this is what it's about.
Yeah.
But I found how they finally described God, and that only came with quantum physics.
Years ago, we used to say, God is the universe and everything in it,
Everything in it. Yep.
which means all of us, as well as everything.
And thanks to that little boson particle that connects the other particles, your chairs are not falling apart under you.
Yeah, that's a good
It
thing.
creates an electronic network that holds all those molecules together so that we can have things that don't fall apart. I had such a good time with this stuff.
This,
As you can tell.
and this next paragraph, it starts to tell you why.
Yeah.
Why funk is not enlightened.
Bless his heart, yeah.
Yeah. The truth is that the earliest documents available to the seminar scholars are some tiny fragments of a papyrus copy of John's Gospel dating to about 130 CE. That's the Common Era.
Yeah.
The first substantial physical evidence for the four Gospels comes from near the end of the 2nd century, about 170 years after Jesus' demise. But even then, as the seminar's leaders point out, hard information is lacking as to how, when, by whom they were actually composed or edited. So it's like working with gauze, you know. There's nothing substantial in it because they're so out of step in time. Nobody is there to remember. Nobody can tell them what really happened. They just get these pieces of stuff that someone has found somewhere, and there's scraps of this and pieces of that. I'm glad that I don't have to make a trip with a road map like that.
I created an exercise where I took copies of the Gospels and I chopped them up into small pieces. And I put the pieces in envelopes and I passed them out to the students and I said, okay, these are the pieces that they were presented with, now you write the Gospel. It was fun.
Yep.
Because everybody perceived them so differently, put them in a different order and so forth, and came out with a different story. It was a lot of fun.
That would be kind of interesting. The kind of exploration we've taken so far has shown that there is no question that the four Gospels contain material derived originally from ancient Egyptian sources. That's a given. We know that. We've already seen plenty of evidence for this in the chapters on Horus and the Lazarus miracle, but we must not think the borrowing was direct. Much of the material had undoubtedly been used and reused in the dramas and plays of the Greco-Roman mystery religions, and a great deal comes by way of what Christians call the Old Testament. Some of it, for example, much of the Sermon on the Mount, comes from a common store of ancient wisdom literature that was widely circulated in the Middle East and eventually found its way into Jewish, Talmudic, and Midrashic imaginative commentaries. With the possible exception of the saying about forgiving one's enemies, and even this is disputed, there is absolutely nothing in the sermon in Matthew's chapters 5 to 7, that's the Sermon on the Mount, paralleled by Luke's Sermon on the Plain, which is his version of the Sermon on the Mount, that cannot be found in the Jewish sources. I already knew that according to the tradition of the Christian fathers, the primary nucleus of the canonical Gospels was not the life of Jesus at all, but a collection of logia, or sayings.
Which are written down.
Yeah, I've lost the
Lost it?
line.
Which are written down in Hebrew or Aramaic by
Thank
Matthew.
you. The scribe of the Lord.
Yeah.
An early writer to bear testimony to Christian history is Papias, the bishop of Hierapolis in Asia Minor. Writing sometime around 120 CE, he emphatically declares that the Christian Gospels were founded upon and originated in the logia, that's this stack of sayings. Papias also said that according to the tradition he received, Jesus died at home in bed of old age.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'd have him hanging on a bed instead of the cross, right?
Or he'd be under the covers.
Yeah.
But see, they wanted to have something that was representative, and they built this story of Jesus, who was the do-all, end-all, almost virtually God, and one of a kind, when it wasn't so.
Well, they considered he was God because they talked about him being the creator.
Yeah, well.
That's another thing that you see all the way down the billboards going south.
Oh,
They
yeah.
never, ever mention God as
Not one time.
Jesus.
Jesus.
Yep.
Any restaurant you stop in has a little placard in front of you that says those things too, so
Yeah.
you don't miss it while you're trying to order your food.
Yeah, I've heard plenty of people who
Yeah.
are not unity or know anything about this, and they talk about Jesus as God.
Oh, yeah,
Oh yeah,
yes.
but no. Don't we say one Lord and Father? One power and one presence? Well, that would make two powers and two presences, would it not? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where did I stop?
Died in bed of old age.
Yeah, that took my breath away. Notice that the Gospel of Thomas, discovered with other Gnostic writings at Nag Hammadi in Egypt in 1945, was purely made up of sayings attributed to Jesus.
Yeah.
It had no passion or resurrection story. The same is true of the hypothetical document Q, a sayings source believed to have been used by both Matthew and Luke.
I don't think they've ever found a manuscript called Q, have
They
they?
have not.
It's supposed to be German.
Yep,
Yeah.
Quella is what the Q stands for, Quella, in German.
And qualia is particles, pieces.
Pieces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's so they put together this idea that there is a document, or there was a document,
There was.
that was a collection of Jesus' sayings gathered together, and that's what was used to put the Gospels together. Well, we don't know that.
I like my way better.
Yeah.
Cut up the Gospels, give everybody a piece, and tell them to write the story.
Somebody want to take the next paragraph?
All right. Papias is the earliest witness to name a written gospel, Mark. He said that Mark, having become the interpreter for Peter, wrote down accurately what he remembered, but not in the correct order. Oh, problem with my dissertation, yeah. For he neither heard the Lord nor accompanied him. Matthew, he says, put the oracles of the Lord in the Hebrew language, and each one interpreted them as best he could. Kuhn notes that Papias knew of no other gospel than those of Mark and Matthew at the time. And actually he had heard of such writings only from the elders at second hand. He had not seen any himself.
Notice that's in italics.
Yeah.
To point it out, he had not seen any himself.
And Gerald Massey derives the word myth from the old Egyptian mutu, meaning utterance or sayings, and relates it to the Egyptian matu, means the word of truth or true sayings. The resemblance to Matthew here cannot be accidental.
Most significantly, key early church fathers, notably Clement of Alexandria, Origen, and Irenaeus, agree, following the witness of Papias against Eusebius, the ever dubious historian, yeah, that Matthew and not Mark was the primary gospel. But there's plenty of evidence to show that these sayings, the admitted foundations of the Gospels, were not first uttered by Jesus or invented afterwards by his followers. Many of them were pre-existent, prehistoric, and therefore certainly pre-Christian. They were collections of Egyptian, Hebrew, and Gnostic sayings, and therefore cannot stand on their own as evidence that the Jesus of the Gospels ever lived as a man or teacher. These sayings were all oral teachings in the ancient mysteries ages before they were written down. Most of the data included in the original Gospel of Matthew in particular were put in with the obvious motive of appearing to fulfill Old Testament prophecy. In other words, Jesus is made to fulfill what had already been written for a different context. Hence the frequent, almost tedious refrain in the gospel that events happened, quote, according as it was prophesied by Isaiah or some other prophet. You can check this aspect out for yourself by reading Matthew carefully and noticing how formulaic this process becomes. It's abundantly clear that the compiler was too uninstructed to know that these prophecies belonged previously to the astronomical allegory of ancient Egypt, and that they did not refer to human history and were not supposed to be fulfilled on the plane of objective event. Yahoo.
Yeah.
There is, you want me to
Go ahead. Yeah.
There is a huge amount of evidence that the core of the spiritual tradition handed down from earliest times was incorporated into collections of the most outstanding, and vital utterances spoken by the Christos figure in the cryptic dramas and rituals of the past. These collations of sacred utterances of the divine Son to humans were circulated in secret all over the ancient world under the name the Logia, or Sayings of the Lord. Having thoroughly weighed the research, I now believe they were the root documents from which the canonical Gospels were extracted. Then, to cover deterioration and suit the various emerging communities of Christians, they were amended, interpolated, and edited by many scribes. I am convinced that this explanation is as near to being the truth of the source, origin, and nature of the Christian Gospels as can be determined.
Any questions?
The scribes of that time, their word was law. And they put their notations in the side, along the sides of the manuscripts. And the next one that came along just incorporated them in the manuscripts.
Into the text, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But their word was law. Nobody questioned the redactors or the editors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This process, or this idea of these things that came from Egypt and other sources, that they were myths or stories.
Mm-hmm.
Some years ago, no, God, it's way back into the early 70s, that I worked with a guy who was a Mason. And we got to talking about the Masonic Order, and he started talking about it, and how he went and watched these plays. And later, I was at the Masonic Temple over there on, oh Lord, what street?
What is it, Paseo? And
Yeah, Paseo and something. 31st Street or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. And we were doing a concert there, and since I was playing contrabassoon, I wasn't until later in the program, so I was backstage, and I met a guy who was part of the organization, and he invited me to take a tour downstairs under the theater, and that's where they have all the costumes to do these plays, to act out the myths. And that's how they teach. They actually dress the guys up, and they do these rituals or these scenes. And I guess you get a good kind of first-hand idea of what's going on in the story by being the story yourself. And so that's why to me these make a lot of sense. When they say this is not history, these are not stories about Jesus. These are plays or teaching tools to teach us about our spiritual selves. And if that's the truth, then all the stuff about it being about Jesus or about this or that or whatever, that's just blowing snow. Because it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Because it's been twisted into something else. So I don't have any trouble with the idea of these things, these myths being teaching things that tell us more about us. I've said over the years many times, it's not about Jesus, it's about you in in these stories. And when we do the metaphysical interpretation, it's not about the story Jesus told, but it's about how does that story work inside you? How does it work its way into and through your life? So it all makes great sense that we've been cheated out of some really valuable stuff over the years because we've been handed a lot of chaff instead of truth. It is worth remembering that most editors of such narratives felt fully at ease using the freedom which all antiquity was wont to allow itself in dealing with literary monuments. Yeah, they could do with pretty much what they wanted. There were no copyright laws. Indeed, as difficult as this is for us to conceive of today, the concept of copyright was utterly foreign to the ancient mind. There was little hesitation in reshaping materials to exclude whatever did not suit the particular editor's point of view, or in substituting other formulae for his own composition and expanding or abridging after his own pleasure. The proof of this for contemporary New Testament scholars and even the attentive lay student can be seen in the somewhat cavalier way in which both Matthew and Luke treat the Gospel of Mark, which both, quite obviously, had before them as they compiled their own. They leave material out, make changes, and add to it at will. Elaine Pagels, author of Beyond Belief, The Secret Gospel of Thomas, reminds us that what survived as Orthodox Christianity did so by suppressing and forcibly eliminating a lot of other material. Yeah. Somebody want to finish that last paragraph?
What is more, we learn from Origen himself that as late as the early 3rd century there were different versions of Matthew's Gospel in circulation. Jerome at the end of the 4th century says the very same thing. He even says that there were as many different texts as there were manuscripts of the Latin version. It was an extreme fundamentalist worship. Let me try again. It was an extreme fundamentalist worst possible nightmare.
And do you recognize why he's saying that about the fundamentalist position? Remember, I've quoted fundamentalism several times, and he said, the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it.
That settles it, yeah.
That's the rigidity of that kind of thinking, and it doesn't work with these. It just doesn't. Do you want to start with the nativity myth, or do you want to break here and not interrupt this? Do this one next week. What do you think? Either way.
Yeah, I'd rather spend a little time discussing than reading anymore.
Okay. So what kind of thoughts go through your mind about this?
Well, I'm taking it all in without any reservation whatsoever. Because when I went to church, I went to the Baptist church. I didn't go to church very often. So there wasn't a lot of stuff in there, the common stuff. Someplace, I've been trying to remember where, somebody said that Jesus is God incarnate. Now, where did I hear that? Any ideas?
I know that that's a
Here.
possibility in Catholicism.
Okay.
I have Catholic friends that say Jesus is God. But then, as you talked about down in the South, you don't see signs about God as much as you see signs about Jesus. It's all about Jesus.
Yeah, you don't see.
Even one that really upset me, it said something about Jesus creating us. I can't remember how it's stated, but I thought, what?
No. No.
The most common one is Jesus is the answer.
Yeah. What's the question?
What's the question?
Yeah. If we're able to see that from a metaphysical point of view and realize when somebody says that what's really is being said is Christ in you is the answer.
Yes.
Christ in you is your Savior. There's no man out there named Jesus who's your Savior. And there's no man out there that's going to come into your life and fix anything. It's all going to be from within out.
They're looking at John 1:14. By virtue of the incarnation in his work becomes our Redeemer and Lord. This is Midrash or something. Yeah, where in what Bible verse is the incarnation? And that's John 1:14. And Charles Fillmore wrote that letter to Georgiana Tree West,
Yeah.
where he said the soul that incarnated in Jesus was from an advanced life wave. But he was talking about the soul, not Jesus himself.
Ed Rabel used to talk about Jesus as being an advanced soul
Yeah.
that incarnated backwards. In other words, didn't need to be in this world,
Yes.
but came into this world to be a teacher.
Came from an advanced life wave and came back to teach humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Ed
And
saying
that
too.
always made sense to
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense to me too.
that somebody's further ahead in another grade, but they come back to be a tutor, and to show us and
When we weren't going to make it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But it's not the same as calling Jesus God, you know? One Father. So it reminds me of one of the funerals I did, and I had to meet with a relative who was Baptist. Sorry. And he was fundamentalist Baptist. He
Yeah,
didn't.
any other kind.
He didn't believe that his uncle, whose person had died, was saved.
Right.
Yep.
And we talked about a bunch of things, and I dropped the word, the Christ within, and he questioned about that, and he said, "Well, how many Christs are there?" And I said, "One." But an infinite number of expressions. And he thought about that and he said, "Oh, I think I understand that." Because
That's so wonderful.
there's not a different Christ in everybody. It's God. It's as the Kabbalists talk about, the spark of God, of Godness that's burning within us. It is one thing, but each one of us is a different expression of that. So, it does make sense.
We are God in action as us.
Yeah.
So in this, it's gone from what we read earlier today, you know, that Jesus was just this man that didn't do any miracles, that, you know, met with common people. So there's that. There's there's the theory that he didn't exist at all. And I think there was a third something, you know, in past. So which is right?
Well, the third one is that there were up to maybe 22 individual Jesuses, because all of the things that said that he did in the Gospels couldn't have been done in one lifetime. So there must have been more than one Jesus.
Yeah, that's a real possibility.
Yeah.
When you think about that divinity that's in each one of us, when we awaken to that, we're going to be the equivalent of a Jesus, which would mean we'd be a representative of that truth and a teacher of that truth. So, one Christ, many expressions, and that's what we're to do, is to be a Christ expression.
Mm-hmm.
The word Christ comes from the Greek Christos, which means anointed.
Anointed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, or a clear pattern with no shadow. And that would be a clear pattern for humanity with no shadow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that that business earlier were talking about all the many denominations and how they don't get along. And but if everyone realized the divinity in themselves and brought it out, there would be no quarrel. We realize we're all one and the same. No head is higher than another.
That John Lennon song, Imagine.
Yep, imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, and here's Robert Funk trying to make a quarrel out of this organization where his experts, so-called experts, are quarreling about whether Jesus actually said this, or maybe he did and maybe he didn't, kind of stuff. Continually fomenting that division, that quarrel.
Just imagine back in the days when they had these, what do you call them? Various meetings and shoot, I can't think of the word.
that happens at our age.
I know. I know.
Ecclesias,
Yeah,
gatherings.
these various meetings that the church, when I say the church, it was the Catholic Church, would have.
Ecumenical.
Yeah, well.
That's all the big words I've got.
Yeah.
That's okay, we don't need a big word, we understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they would get together with the bishops and they'd fight over what books were going to be included in the Bible,
Okay.
the various things.
Council of Nicaea.
Councils,
Councils.
yes,
There we go.
yes. Those councils, and there were several, with various things that they would fight out, but
Or trade off. Agree.
trade off. Yeah, it was like election day.
Yeah.
Going around trying to convince people to vote for the books you want. You know, yeah. I'll vote for your book if you'll vote for mine.
Yes, like politicians.
So we ended up with 4 when there were
But they're
many.
still going around doing that voting in the Catholic hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
They meet every year and they kind of trade off. I'll give you this if you'll give me that. And they still do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think of the name of the book that I read. It's an older book. It's about a priest who was kind of out of favor and lived outside of the enclave there, but wound up becoming the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going through the politics involved in what the teachings were going to be and what was going to be in the church, and yeah, it was quite interesting and quite divisive. You know, they it wasn't what is the truth. It's how many.
And
we
let
trade.
us not forget that a few didn't survive.
Yeah,
You know, because they.
they exterminated a few popes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they left one pope out of the lineup entirely, and that was Pope Joan. And that
Pope
was
Joan, yes.
And that was 12 years that she was the pope, and they never knew she was a female
Yep.
until in a parade she hemorrhaged. And so from now on, those people going to be elected pope have to sit on what looks like a big potty chair with a hole in it, with the family jewels hanging down so everybody can go by and make sure they're male before they. Yep.
Yeah, it's like a birthing chair.
Yeah, like a birthing chair. Yeah. And they do that
You didn't
today.
know these things, huh?
They do that today. That's not old stuff. They still do that.
Yeah, but today you can actually put them on. You can have a sex change.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
takes a little more time. That's,
Stick on parts.
Yeah.
yeah,
Ouch.
yeah. Just don't sit down.
Yeah.
Just think.
Oh,
boys and
what
girls,
goes on at the Vatican is just ghastly.
half of my family, or part of my family, is Youth for Christ.
Oh,
They
fun.
started it. So every time there was a funeral, they'd all point their fingers at those nasty Christian Scientists. They're going to go to hell. And what's the matter with on and on and on?
Yeah, yeah. They're more concerned about other people going to hell.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that their feet are on fire.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I had to do a memorial service. I did the graveside service for this young man who died of an overdose.
Oh dear.
And his father was angry, and he was going to have his minister do the funeral service. And the mother came to me, and she said, "Would you please do this graveside?" And I said, "Yeah." And I walked in there, and there was about 60 people there, and here was this minister up there telling them that this kid was going to hell, and they were all going to the whole 9 yards. And I'm standing there saying, "Okay, God, what do you have? How do I get through this?"
Yeah.
And the funeral director then called me forward and he said, "You're going to follow Reverend Carroll out to the graveside." There was a young man that stood up in the middle of that congregation and he said, "Wait a minute, I have to tell you something. He came to me in a dream last night and he told me to tell you that he's okay."
Oh,
And I thought, praise the Lord. I went up and I took his arm and I said, "Thank you so much."
Yes.
And so when I got out to the graveside, this minister stood in front of me like this, daring me to
Yes.
say anything, and I thought, "Boy, are you barking up the wrong girl, buddy." You know, I gave him the whole 9 yards, and that this young man was not in that grave, and talked about moving on. And all of his people came up and hugged me and were so thankful, and he stood there and he gave me this fishy handshake and walked away. And I thought, your life's been changed for everybody, you just don't know it yet. But, you know,
I don't know why they want to be so miserable. I mean, if you watch, especially the older ones on TV, they're so disingenuous. You know, they bring up things like, well, I heard about a fifth of whiskey. Now, I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is? No, I don't know. You know,
They don't
nobody
know what a
does.
fifth of whiskey is?
No, never seen it. Don't know anything about it. And then their faces are so pinched up and hateful.
they actually need
When
to
they're-
drink that fifth of
Exactly.
whiskey.
I was just thinking that. They just
Yeah.
need a good slug of
Well, they
that stuff.
probably do. I mean, That's why they're denying it so
There's
much.
an older guy on there that he's been preaching there for a long time, and he is so negative. Can't remember what his name was, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then there's Joel Goldstein,
Yeah.
and he's okay, but he gets up there and he says, "You know, God loves you, and God has wonderful things for you." And he goes on with this kind of thing. God told me this about you, and that's where I sort of shut it off. And that now God doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Joyce Myers.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
She does the same kind of thing, and she's kind of okay until she gets to that point where she says, "And you know what God told me about you?" And I thought, okay, shut that one off. You know, she talks about prosperity and so forth, and she does pretty well up to a point, and then she gets into that other stuff.
Every time I see her on television, I think, she's an alien.
I know.
She's from another planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just trying not to lose my strap so I won't have to get down on the
Oh,
floor.
oh, I
didn't know
thought
what
you were
you were
getting
handing.
friendly over there.
I have learned if anything goes on the floor, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
You got to bend over a long way to get to that strap.
Yes.
The next section that we go into, that starts with the nativity myth, etc. This is some good stuff.
It's good stuff, but on the other hand, it makes you feel like, what is there to hang on to?
Yeah.
I
Well.
mean, verses that you have put in your head to cling to when you have an emergency or something.
It's hard to cuddle up to a spiritual principle, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And to feel that warmth and so forth that we were told was there. And I still have to remind myself of that too, because the stuff I'm studying is way out there in the cosmos too. And what is eternal about us is the soul and the energy, the consciousness. They've discovered that people who are thought to be brain dead or in a vegetative state still have consciousness. And this is what I'm writing about, you guys. This consciousness does not go away. But now they've been able to ask a question that only that person would know the answer to, and that person who's supposed to be brain dead would have the correct response.
Really?
They could detect that correct response. Now, this is a person who can't respond physically or verbally, but that consciousness is still in there working.
Well, how do they determine that it is the right answer?
The technology that they have now,
Reading brain waves?
yeah, that kind of thing, that there's an activity there that they didn't think would be there.
So what happens when they pull the plug, or should they ever
Consciousness.
pull the plug?
Consciousness is still there. And from then on, we don't know what happens after we die because we ain't been there yet. Yeah, yeah. But it's an indication that consciousness is the presence of God in you, and it never goes away. And whatever we experienced before we were born into this life, we go back to, as Greg was saying, of how we come out of that place into the physicality and go back to that place again. And most of us don't remember what that was, and we don't know what it's going to be. But all Jesus said was, "Follow me."
Even when I was going to the Baptist church, I had this idea that, they say you're going to heaven or hell. Okay, if I get my choice, I'm going to heaven. And then there's all these people that I want to see. All these people that I want to talk to, like Abraham Lincoln or John Kennedy or something like that. And I'm thinking, I can do that because you get rid of the physicality. Spirit, you can split up into a million pieces and go visit all of their million pieces, and you can visit a million people at once.
Yeah,
That's what I was thinking when I was like 12.
I think that was a good thought. And my sister 2 beloved husbands have died. It's just, well, I really look forward to seeing them again. And I thought, yeah, and you're going to see a bunch of people you probably don't want to see again.
Exactly.
They're all going to be there, sis. I don't tell her that. You know.
Well, I told Jackie that as I'm trying to work my way through traffic and everybody's stopping and everybody's looking over and doing this and everything except driving. And I said, you know, if unity's right, there is no hell. Everybody's going to heaven. There's going to be a lot of people up there I don't like.
Everybody's going. Well, the book of Revelation, St. John the Divine, right at the beginning it said I was in the Spirit. And then he was shown all of those things all through the book of Revelation and taken to the New Jerusalem. He was never threatened to be dropped down into that stuff or anything. He was just shown it. And this is the lower consciousness he was looking at and all the sturm and drang that goes on there. But eventually they all go to the lake of fire, which purifies them and all that stuff, and they go to the New Jerusalem. Nobody falls through the cracks.
Yeah. Yep. We're all gonna make it
Yeah.
to that place where every one of us will stand in the presence in all the glory with which we have been created.
And all that we could not have known about in physical form.
Right.
And we find out, yeah, it's all still there.
Yep.
Yeah.
It gets more and more exciting. It seems like, well, I heard people years ago in Unity say they've taken away my Lord.
Yeah.
When you talk about principle and things like that, and you don't worship Jesus, in, you know, where they